Have you ever noticed that some of your favorite Simpsons characters just vanished? One day they were there, and the next they were gone with no explanation. From shocking real-life tragedies to behind-the-scenes controversies, today we're breaking down exactly what happened to Springfield's most unforgettable lost characters, starting with the beloved Mrs. Krabappel. For the first 25 seasons of The Simpsons, Edna Krabappel was one of the most recognizable faces at Springfield Elementary. With her sarcastic remarks, her ever-present cigarette, and that unforgettable cackle, she wasn't just Bart's teacher. She was a fixture of the entire show. What made Edna stand out was her razor-sharp wit. She wasn't afraid to shut down Bart's endless pranks, usually with a brutal one-liner. And yet, beneath her cynical exterior, Edna had a surprising soft spot for Bart. One of the best examples comes from Season 2's Bart Gets an F. In that episode, Bart tries desperately to pass her class. At first, Edna fails him without hesitation, but when she sees how much effort he put in, she bends the rules just enough to let him squeak by. It was one of the first moments where audiences realized that Edna wasn't just a grumpy teacher, she genuinely cared about her students. Of course, Edna's personal life was often just as messy as Bart's homework. Over the years, we watched her bounce through some of Springfield's most bizarre romances. She dated Principal Skinner, which led to plenty of awkward moments in the teacher's lounge. She briefly got involved with Comic Book Guy, and at one point she was nearly swept up by none other than Sideshow Bob. Naturally, Bart interrupted that one because, let's face it, nothing good ever comes from Sideshow Bob's plans.
You only get one chance with Edna Krabappel. I hope you're happy.
But Edna's biggest romance came later in the series, when she began dating Ned Flanders. At first, the pairing seemed odd. Ned, the squeaky clean religious neighbor, and Edna, the jaded, sarcastic teacher. But somehow, it worked. Ned brought out Edna's softer side, and Edna gave Ned a taste of spontaneity he had never really known. Their relationship became a genuine bright spot in the later seasons, proving that even in Springfield, opposites really do attract. Sadly, the romance, and Edna's presence on the show, came to an end not because of a storyline decision, but because of real life. In 2013, Marsha Wallace, the actress who had voiced Edna since the beginning, passed away. Instead of recasting the role, The Simpsons chose to retire Edna permanently. It was a decision that showed deep respect for Wallace, but it also meant the end of a beloved character. The tribute was subtle but powerful. In Season 25's The Man Who Grew Too Much, Bart writes, "We'll really miss you, Mrs. K," on the chalkboard. And later in the episode, Ned and Nelson share a quiet moment remembering her. It was a rare, heartfelt pause in a series best known for its comedy, and it gave fans a chance to say goodbye. Edna Krabappel will never return to Springfield. And while that's heartbreaking, it's also fitting. Because she wasn't just a character, she was a piece of The Simpsons' history. Losing her left a hole in the show that no one else could ever really fill. But Edna wasn't the only character Springfield had to say goodbye to. Sometimes, characters disappear not because of tragedy, but because the writers simply don't know what to do with them. And that's exactly what happened to Homer's half-brother Herb Powell. Now, if losing Mrs. Krabappel felt like losing part of Bart's childhood, then Homer's half-brother Herb Powell is the kind of character who makes you wonder what could have been. Because Herb had all the ingredients to become a recurring fan favorite, yet somehow, he ended up as one of the most underused characters in Simpsons history. We first meet Herb in the Season 2 classic Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? It starts with a shocking family revelation. Homer finds out he actually has a half-brother. The story goes that Abe Simpson, in one of his less-than-honorable moments, hooked up with a carnival worker before marrying Mona. That fling resulted in a son, Herb, who grew up without ever knowing his father, or his goofy half-brother in Springfield. When Homer finally discovers Herb's existence, he tracks him down in the phone book. But instead of finding some average guy, he's shocked to learn that Herb Powell is a multi-millionaire. Herb owns his own car company, Powell Motors, and lives in a luxurious mansion. For the first time in his life, Homer has a relative who isn't just surviving, he's thriving. But this is The Simpsons, so you already know where things are headed. Herb, thrilled to meet his long-lost brother, decides to give Homer a chance to contribute to Powell Motors. And how does he do that? By letting Homer design a car for the average American family. It sounds like a good idea in theory, but when Homer is in charge, the average American suddenly wants bubble domes, multiple horns, shag carpeting, and a price tag of $82,000. The end result, the Homer, is nothing short of catastrophic. It's ugly, it's impractical, and it bankrupts Powell Motors almost overnight. In the span of one episode, Herb goes from wealthy CEO to penniless outcast, all because he trusted Homer. But unlike many one-off Simpsons characters, Herb wasn't completely forgotten. He actually returns in Season 3's Brother, Can You Spare Two Dimes? Here, we see Herb living under a bridge, homeless and bitter. And honestly, who could blame him? He lost everything. Yet, instead of staying down, Herb finds redemption through a new invention, a baby translator. With a little financial help from Homer, who happens to win $2,000 from Mr. Burns, Herb turns his idea into a massive success. Just like that, Herb is rich again. It felt like the show was setting him up to become a recurring presence, maybe even a fun rich uncle figure for Bart and Lisa. But instead, Herb quietly vanished. Aside from a tiny cameo years later in Season 24's The Changing of the Guardian and a blink and you'll miss it one-liner in Season 36, Herb has been completely sidelined. And that's a shame, because he was voiced by none other than Danny DeVito. Yes, an actual Hollywood legend was voicing Homer's brother, and the writers barely used him. Fans have long debated why Herb was abandoned. Some think it was scheduling conflicts with DeVito. Others think the writers just didn't know how to keep him around without overshadowing Homer. Whatever the reason, Herb Powell stands as one of the greatest what-ifs in The Simpsons' long history. He could have added a whole new dynamic to the Simpson family, but instead, he's mostly remembered for building the worst car of all time. And while Herb's disappearance was more about wasted potential than tragedy, the next lost Simpsons character was removed for an entirely different reason, one that sparked a heated debate about stereotypes, representation, and cancel culture. I'm talking, of course, about Springfield's most famous shopkeeper, Apu Nahasapima. For nearly 3 decades, Apu Nahasapima was one of the most recognizable faces in Springfield. As the owner of the Quick E-Mart, he wasn't just a side character, he was a cultural icon. With his thick accent, boundless energy, and his famous catchphrase, "Thank you, come again."
Thank y'all, come again.
Apu became one of the show's most enduring characters. And while a lot of people remember him for the running gags, selling expired food, tricking customers, or overcharging Homer, Apu was actually at the center of some of The Simpsons' most heartfelt and memorable episodes. Take the Season 5 classic Homer and Apu. At the start, Apu is exposed for selling tainted food, which costs him his job. It could have been a throwaway gag, but instead, the episode dives deep into Apu's character. He feels guilt, regret, and a genuine need to make amends. He even moves in with the Simpson family, where we see a more vulnerable human side to him. And of course, it all wraps up with a hilarious but surprisingly touching redemption arc, when Apu saves James Woods, takes a bullet for him, and wins his job back at the Quick E-Mart. Episodes like this showed that Apu was more than just a stereotype. He was part of Homer's bowling team, the Pin Pals. He sang with the B-Sharps, Homer's Grammy-winning barbershop quartet. He was even given entire storylines about his arranged marriage to Manjula and the chaos of raising octuplets. Apu wasn't just a punchline. He was a fully developed character with layers, heart, and plenty of laughs. But by the late 2000s, everything changed. In 2017, comedian Hari Kondabolu released a documentary called The Problem with Apu, which argued that the character perpetuated negative stereotypes about Indian and South Asian people. The documentary sparked a massive cultural debate. For some viewers, Apu was a funny, beloved part of the show. But for others, he was a damaging caricature, an accent and a catchphrase that too often became the butt of jokes in real life. The controversy grew louder, and by 2020, Hank Azaria, the actor who had voiced Apu since the beginning, announced that he would no longer play the character. Azaria explained that it never sat right with him that people, especially kids, were bullied because of how Apu was portrayed. He admitted that while the role wasn't created to harm anyone, the impact was real, and it was time to step back. And just like that, Apu disappeared. Unlike Edna Krabappel, there was no tribute episode, no storyline to explain his absence. He simply faded from Springfield. For longtime fans, it felt jarring. Here was a character who had been part of the show for nearly 30 seasons, suddenly erased because of controversy. But the debate didn't end there. Many fans argued that Apu had always been portrayed with affection, and that if the show wanted to address concerns, they could have reimagined him instead of writing him out. After all, Groundskeeper Willie is just as much of a stereotype of Scottish people, yet he remains on the show without backlash. So why Apu and not Willie? That's a question that still divides fans today. What's undeniable is that Apu's removal marked a turning point. For the first time, The Simpsons retired a character not because of an actor's death or a creative choice, but because of real-world cultural pressure. And whether you agree with the decision or not, it's hard to deny that Springfield feels a little emptier without its most famous shopkeeper. But while Apu's disappearance was shaped by controversy, the next lost Simpsons character left under far more emotional circumstances. Because Homer's mother, Mona Simpson, didn't just vanish. Her story became one of the most heartbreaking arcs in the show's entire history. When you think about Homer Simpson's childhood, the first parent who usually comes to mind is Abe. Grandpa Simpson is cranky, forgetful, and often the butt of the joke, but he's at least always been around. What makes Mona Simpson stand out is that she wasn't. Homer's mother was a mysterious missing figure for most of his life, and when she finally did appear, her story turned out to be one of the most tragic in the entire series. Mona's big reveal comes in Season 7's Mother Simpson. The episode begins with Homer faking his own death to get out of work. Classic Homer. But when he goes to clear things up, he literally falls into his own grave, where a mysterious woman appears and scolds him. That woman, his long-lost mother. At first, it seems like a joyful reunion. Mona bonds with Bart, Lisa, and Maggie instantly. For Homer, though, things aren't so simple. He spent decades believing his mother abandoned him. And in a way she did, but as the episode unfolds, we learn why. Back in the 1960s, Mona was a radical activist fighting against corporate greed and corruption. In one protest, she and her group sabotaged a germ warfare lab owned by none other than Mr. Burns. Unfortunately, she was spotted in the act, and Burns swore he would hunt her down forever. Facing arrest and imprisonment, Mona went on the run, leaving her family behind. It's a heartbreaking twist. Mona didn't abandon Homer because she didn't love him. She did it to protect herself, and by extension, him. Still, the damage was done. Their emotional reunion in that graveyard is cut short when police arrive, forcing Mona to flee once again. Watching Homer chase after her car, screaming for her not to go, is one of the most gut-wrenching moments The Simpsons has ever produced. Mona's story didn't end there. She returned several times throughout the series, each appearance tugging at the heartstrings. In My Mother the Carjacker, Season 15, she briefly wins a lawsuit against Mr. Burns, even getting the germ warfare lab renamed in her honor. But Burns tricks her into admitting she lived under a false identity, leading to her arrest. In classic Mona fashion, she stages a daring escape, crashing a prison bus off a cliff and faking her own death to slip away once more. That's what made Mona such a fascinating character. She was part loving mother, part outlaw rebel, always walking the line between warmth and chaos. Every time she showed up, you never knew if you were about to see a touching family moment or a wild political protest. Sadly, the show eventually closed the book on her for good. In Season 19's Mona Leavesa, Mona passes away off-screen, leaving Homer devastated. What follows is a deeply emotional episode where Homer struggles with grief, regret, and the memories of their fractured relationship. It's one of the few times The Simpsons plays things straight. No jokes, no satire, just raw emotion. For many fans, this felt like the wrong move. Mona was too rich, too complex of a character to be written off permanently. There were so many stories left to tell. Her relationship with Lisa, her romance with Abe, even her future as a fugitive activist. But instead, aside from the occasional flashback or ghost cameo, Mona Simpson became yet another lost character. And maybe that's what makes her absence sting so much. With Edna Krabappel, her retirement was a mark of respect for Marcia Wallace. With Apu, it was controversy. But with Mona, it felt like a choice, a decision to close off a character who had endless potential. Her story left Homer scarred, fans heartbroken, and Springfield with one less voice of rebellion. But Mona wasn't the only character taken away under tragic circumstances. Because next, we have to talk about two of Springfield's funniest faces. Characters who disappeared not because of creative choice, but because of a real-world tragedy that shocked Hollywood. Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure. If you grew up with The Simpsons in the 1990s, you probably still hear their voices in your head.
Lionel Hutz, attorney at law. Here's my card. It turns into a sponge when you put it in water.
Ooh, classy.
Lionel Hutz, the sleazy, incompetent lawyer who would take any case for a quick buck, and Troy McClure, the washed-up Hollywood actor with a fake smile and a resume filled with ridiculous B-movies. Both characters brought some of the show's sharpest satire, and both vanished from Springfield far too soon. Let's start with Lionel Hutz. He was Springfield's answer to Saul Goodman before Saul Goodman even existed. Hutz was always ready to pounce on desperate clients, promising results he couldn't deliver. He once bragged that he would work on a contingency basis, no money down. He even handed out business cards with the Bar Association logo printed on them, only to sheepishly admit, oops, shouldn't have this here. He was the perfect parody of the ambulance-chasing lawyer, and every courtroom scene he appeared in instantly became comedy gold. Then there was Troy McClure. You may remember him from such films as The Erotic Adventures of Hercules or Man vs. Nature, The Road to Victory. He was the embodiment of the cheesy, fading Hollywood star, clinging to relevance through infomercials, bad movies, and guest appearances. His smug delivery and endless self-promotion were always hilarious, but there was also something oddly endearing about him. He knew he was washed up, but he still carried himself like a superstar. McClure's best moment came in A Fish Called Selma, Season 7. After rumors circulate about his bizarre private life, yes, the infamous fish jokes, Troy stages a publicity stunt marriage with Selma Bouvier to save his career. It's cynical, shameless, and perfectly Troy, but it works. He actually manages to land a role in a Planet of the Apes musical, one of the most unforgettable parodies the show has ever done. I hate every ape I see, from chimpanzee to chimpanzee. The brilliance of both Hutz and McClure came from the same source. Phil Hartman. Hartman was a legendary comedian, famous from Saturday Night Live and known for his impeccable voice work. He had this unique ability to make sleazy, shallow characters sound both charming and hilarious. On The Simpsons, he didn't just voice Hutz and McClure, he also brought life to countless other background characters, each one distinct and memorable. But tragically, Phil Hartman's story came to an abrupt and devastating end. In 1998, Hartman's wife killed him and then took her own life. The news stunned Hollywood, devastated fans, and left The Simpsons cast and crew heartbroken. In the wake of his death, the producers made a decision that spoke volumes about how much they valued Hartman's contribution. They immediately retired all of his characters. There was no recasting, no attempt to imitate his style. Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure simply disappeared from Springfield. Their absence was never explained in the show. They were just gone. Matt Groening and the writers also paid tribute. At the end of Bart the Mother, the last episode Hartman had worked on, the credits rolled with a simple, heartbreaking dedication. In loving memory of Phil Hartman. For fans, losing Lionel Hutz and Troy McClure was like losing two pillars of the show's humor. Hutz had the ability to turn every legal scene into absurdity. McClure brought Hollywood satire that felt timeless. And while Springfield has introduced hundreds of side characters since, none have ever quite filled the gap left by Phil Hartman's voice. Their disappearance is a reminder of how closely The Simpsons has always been tied to real life. Sometimes characters aren't written out because of ratings or controversies, they're lost because the people who made them great are no longer here. And as devastating as Phil Hartman's death was, it wasn't the last time Springfield lost a major family member, because just 2 seasons later, another beloved character was suddenly killed off. And this time, it wasn't tragedy, but a cold behind-the-scenes dispute that sealed her fate. I'm talking about Maude Flanders. If there's one Simpsons character whose exit still feels controversial to this day, it's Maude Flanders. For the first 11 seasons of the show, Maude was the moral anchor of the Flanders family. As Ned's wife, she embodied the wholesome, devout Christian lifestyle that constantly clashed with The Simpsons' chaos. She scolded Homer, raised Rod and Todd with strict religious values, and often came across as judgmental or uptight. But beneath that rigidity, Maude was also sweet, supportive, and protective of her family. Her presence added depth to Ned's character too. While Ned was endlessly optimistic, Maude balanced him out with caution and traditional values. They weren't just a married couple in Springfield. They were a symbol of what Homer and Marge could never quite achieve, the perfect religious household. And that made her sudden disappearance all the more shocking. In Season 11's Alone Again, Natra Diddley, Maude Flanders was unexpectedly killed off. And the way it happened? A t-shirt cannon accident at a NASCAR-style race. Homer ducks out of the way, and Maude is struck in the chest, falling to her death. Just like that, Ned is a widower, Rod and Todd have lost their mother, and Springfield is left in disbelief. For fans, it wasn't just the death that stung, it was how it was handled. Instead of a dramatic, emotional send-off, Maude's death was played mostly for comedy. The gag of Homer ducking and Maude taking the hit felt mean-spirited. And while the rest of the episode does focus on Ned's grief, many viewers felt the tone didn't match the gravity of losing a longtime character. So why did Maude die at all? The real answer came from behind the scenes. Maggie Roswell, the actress who voiced Maude, had been part of the show since the beginning, but as The Simpsons grew into a massive global hit, she asked for a pay raise and the ability to record her lines from her home in Colorado rather than flying to Los Angeles every week. Fox, in a move that baffled fans, refused her request. Instead of negotiating, the studio decided to kill off Maude entirely. It was a shocking decision. After all, Roswell wasn't asking for an outrageous salary, just fair compensation and a little flexibility. Yet, the producers chose the nuclear option. The result was Maude's abrupt and, for many fans, disrespectful exit. The backlash was strong. Fans criticized the show for writing off a character in such a casual way. Eventually, the controversy forced Fox's hand. By 2002, just a couple of years later, Maggie Roswell was rehired under better terms, including the ability to record from home. But by then, the damage was done. Maude was gone, and she would only ever return in flashbacks, dream sequences, or ghostly cameos. Her absence left a lasting impact on the show. For Ned, it meant an arc of loneliness, grief, and awkward attempts at dating again, most notably with Edna Krabappel years later. For Springfield, it meant one less voice of conservative, religious morality. And for fans, it was a reminder that sometimes, the most shocking Simpsons moments aren't scripted for laughs. They come from messy behind-the-scenes conflicts. Maude Flanders' death is often remembered as one of the show's most controversial storylines. Not because the writers couldn't make a character death work, they had done it beautifully with Bleeding Gums Murphy and Mona Simpson, but because of how preventable it was. Maude didn't need to be killed off. She was written out not because of story, but because of a contract dispute. And that makes her one of the most bitter examples of a lost Simpsons character. And with that, we've covered every major figure who mysteriously vanished from Springfield, whether through tragedy, controversy, or corporate stubbornness. So now it's your turn. Which lost Simpsons character do you miss the most? Let me know in the comments below, because one thing's for sure, Springfield has never been quite the same without them.